Okay.
All right. Thank you so very much for having me to the Franklin Senior Center. I'm excited to be with you virtually. I have been to the Senior Center many times in the past, and I am excited to offer some ideas, suggestions, strategies, and things to think about when you're headed out on the trail. Because for lots of us during the pandemic, the outdoors has been where we have felt safest, where we've actually been able to, despite the the virus, we've been able to meet with family masked and walk outdoors, spend time with those we love, family and friends. And so I'd like to just share with you some of my favorite places that are easy walks, talk about what I mean when I describe easy walks, and we'll go from there. So when we're talking about easy walks, and sometimes people don't always understand what that means. And for me, it means when you see a path like this, I assure you, this is not an easy walk. Sometimes it's easier to say what it isn't. So when I'm looking for easy walks, I'm looking for a place that has not too many roots, not too many rocks, is relatively level, doesn't have to be completely flat, and have something of interest along the way, whether it's a pond, whether it's a stream, whether it's a river, or a view, something, just something besides walking through a bunch of trees. I come to this as a person who was not able to walk 28 years ago when I found myself in a hospital bed after surgery, completely paralyzed on my right side. So this has been a half a life journey for me of learning to walk again, find ways to walk, and then find places outdoors that I could feel safe in the outdoors. And it's become a journey that I have invited many people to share and have felt like I have something to give back, which is a wonderful, wonderful feeling. Everyone has things to give, and it's really wonderful to affirm that. And Easy Walks for me has been my way of being able to give back and share some of the lessons learned along a sometimes challenging path. All right. I'm going to, huh, it's not moving to there, sorry. There. Okay, and so I'm going to take you first off to very, very local Beaver Pond. And lots of you are probably familiar with Beaver Pond. It's where the town now has its swimming lessons. And it's also got a wonderful little trail alongside the pond. It's a short trail, but it's got views of the water. And there's an extra trail kind of midway between the pond area, and there's a utility road that it ends at, just probably a quarter mile or so. It's not a terribly long trail, but there's an extra trail that I have seen signs of beaver at Beaver Pond. So I'm sorry, my buttons aren't working the way I'd like them to. I'm gonna take you next to the sculpture park, which is probably the newest, one of the newest outdoor locations in Franklin. Handicapped friendly. It's completely ADA accessible and wheelchair accessible, and used to be the town swimming pond. And in fact, if you look at, this is part of the sculpture park. And yes, it really used to be the town swimming pool. They used what was left, the remnants of this pool, to help make the path that goes all the way around the pond. It's actually a dammed stream that ends up spilling into Mine Brook, which then goes into the Charles River. So there are portions of the pool along the walk. So when you're walking there, look for them. And there's a nice video on the Franklin Matters website that shows one of your local residents in Franklin talking about when this was a pool, with little short videos and lots of still pictures of what the area looked like. Very, very different than what it looks like today. But this offers shade and sun, lots of outdoor sculptures. It's just a delightful place. And when people say, well, it's kind of short for me, take another lap around. There's really, it's a great place to meet friends and be able to move on, to go on your way. I like to encourage people to never forget that your town commons. We in New England are very, very lucky to have town commons that many of them are very, very walkable and very accessible. This happens to be a picture of the Bellingham Town Common. I've been on the Franklin Town Common, which is lovely. I just didn't have very good pictures of it. But they're paved trails and there's shade, there's benches, there's historical markers. Our town commons are a huge resource, and I think a lot of people think about them, but we kind of forget and take them for granted, that they're very inviting and great places to learn about local history. Make sure when you're walking, sometimes stop and read some of the markers. You'll learn something about your community you didn't know before. We are so lucky in Franklin, in Bellingham, and beyond to the west to have the SNET. Now, this was a portion in Bellingham where has handicapped accessible crushed stone dust surface. The Bellingham section from Center Street to Lake Street and actually to the tunnel are all ADA, not at Lake Street. They're all handicapped friendly, ADA accessible from Center Street close to Lake Street, that you can go on this trail in a wheelchair, with a walker, with a bike, with children. Roller skates might not be as great because it's stone dust as opposed to paved. But there are great things happening. The Franklin Bellingham Rail Trail organization posts monthly. They post new story walks along the trail, and then they rotate out the books, put new books there. There's an awful lot happening. Group walks are hosted pretty much monthly along there. They will do group cleanups if you like to volunteer your help and get out and help make this a better trail resource for the entire community. There's a lot happening on the SNET. The SNET is the Southern New England Trunkline Trail, and the trailhead begins at Grove Street in Franklin. That portion to Prospect Street is not what you call developed yet. It's actually quite mucky in some places right by the solar installation at Spring Street right now. But once you get past that section and head over toward where the new tunnel is, I'll show you a picture of that next. There, this new tunnel at Prospect Street has made it so from Franklin all the way to Center Street in Bellingham is a straight walk. You don't have to climb up the hill and cross over Prospect Street. You can stay safely on the trail through the tunnel. So it is now much easier to travel on the SNET in Franklin. And so from Lake Street to the tunnel is handicapped accessible. Handicapped friendly is more the term that I would use. Let's talk a little bit about some of the things that you want to make sure that you have with you when you head out walking. I strongly encourage people, when you're walking, avoid wearing open-toed shoes. I know it's summer and you like to wear sandals, and when you're somewhere other than pavement, boots, something that's closed-toed shoes are a much, much safer option. You're not going to get sand and rocks stuck inside your shoes. You're not going to injure your foot by some means. It's just a better idea. You can see on these boots, these are lug soles. So in all kinds of weather, you can get better, you've got better stability and better footing with lug soles. Notice the socks that I have. Those are not my just regular everyday little cotton socks. These are hiking socks. People will say you have to wear wool. I'm allergic to wool, so I don't wear wool. But I did get hiking socks that are thicker, that have more texture to them, and just give you a little more cushioning when you're walking for a mile or 2 or 3, depending on what your capacity and your tolerance for distance is. A tip that I offer to people is don't wash those socks too often, especially they don't really need it. Once you're done with your walk, take them out, let them dry. I just drape them over my boots. Every now and then when they do get too smelly, sure, throw them in the laundry, but do not put them in the dryer. Things that go in the dryer, it wears out the elastic. And before you know it, those wonderful hiking socks that you purchased are now going to be down, bunched up underneath your heel, and you're going to be spending your walk. Instead of enjoying the beautiful outdoors, you are going to be helplessly, hopelessly, frustratingly tugging those hiking socks back up and wishing you hadn't put them in the dryer. Hiking socks don't belong in the dryer. Line dry only, or just let them air dry over your boots. They'll be fine. I encourage people to bring a small pack along when they walk, just to keep everything in one place so you're not juggling things, paying attention to your water or your purse or whatever is hanging loose off of your shoulders. Put everything in one pack. Maybe you have an old school backpack in that front hall closet. Grab that, take it along. It really doesn't matter what it looks like, doesn't matter particularly the size, as long as it can carry the things that you want to bring to keep yourself safe and comfortable when you're out for your walk. It's a good idea to bring water along, some fresh water in a sealed water bottle. I encourage people not to use those disposable water bottles that you buy at the grocery store. They've minimized the plastic, which is good, but that means those little tops, those screw-on tops, pop off quite easily. So if you stumbled and landed on a bush or something, even that amount of pressure could end up having water all over everything else in your backpack, which makes everything not pretty wet and not so useful. So I encourage you to invest in getting a water bottle that has a solid screw top that will not burst if you bump into anything. It's a good idea to bring snacks for each person in your group. Homemade gorp works fine. Make sure it's packed in a tightly sealed container, and that can be just a Ziploc bag. You don't have to buy commercial granola bars. In fact, they're not necessary at all. But just put it in something that's sealed, that you're not going to end up with all your peanuts in the bottom of your sack, and which is often not the cleanest place. So just something. And it will often make the difference between everyone being cheerful by the time you get back off of the trail and saying, let's do that again, or people saying, that wasn't so fun, I think I've had enough. This is a headlamp, and for people who aren't familiar with them, you can purchase them at Home Depot. Agway may have them. These are a great tool to keep in your backpack. You put them over your head while you're walking, and then your hands are either free to be able to do whatever else you need to keep safe on the trail, or to have your hands free for using hiking poles. So if you leave for a trail walk, especially if it's one that you're not particularly familiar with, make sure that you tuck a headlamp into your backpack, and then you'll have that just in case. You probably won't ever need it. They weigh very little, they're very, very light, but they're a great tool to have just in case. So this is the whole package for what I call your must-haves. You want your boots, you want your hiking socks, you want a snack, you want some water, you want your headlamp, and a freshly charged, fully charged cell phone, understanding that a cell phone is not a guarantee. You may not have cell phone coverage, though in this particular area right around Franklin, it's pretty normal that we will have cell phone coverage in most places. If you're in any place that's got mountains or even hills, I've noticed sometimes even the cell phone coverage going over to Upton is not so great. So you really don't know, so don't depend on it, but have it fully charged. There are apps that you can use that will work for while you're on the trail to help trail finding. I also encourage people, if you have your cell phone and you come to a trailhead, take a picture of the map. Often there's a map at the trailhead when you get started on a walk. Take a picture of that map, and then you have it on your cell phone, whether you've got cell reception or not, you'll have that map. Otherwise, I encourage people to print a map of an area that they plan to walk on. Another strategy, especially in these times when we've had such crowded trails, is if you plan on going to one trail, have a plan B in place in case that one trail feels seriously overcrowded, or you go on it and say, this just isn't what I can do. Whether there's too many roots for you, there's too many rocks, whether it really isn't suiting what you need. Have that plan B in place. That's one of the strategies that I and my family try to use whenever we head out. We do a little bit of research before, so we have some idea where we're headed, and then have a second place nearby so we don't get discouraged and say, well, that didn't work, and end up going home having had no time outdoors. And that would be really sad. High Street Trail is a town-owned trail along the Charles River in Bellingham. It is right off of High Street in Bellingham. And from Franklin, the closest street for you would be Route 140 up to North Maple Street. Takes you to High Street. And it's a lovely town-owned property. From the street, you won't necessarily know that there's a trail there. It's the athletic fields for the town are on High Street, and at the very back of the athletic fields, I've noticed a lot of towns do this, that they have athletic fields. Over in Franklin, you've got the Dacey fields, and there's trails behind the Dacey Dacey fields. Those are a little not as well marked as I would like. I didn't include them in this presentation. There are some trails that are easy walking, but it's variable. So here you can see I've got hiking poles for balance. I've got my little fanny pack on with the warmer weather coming on. I've got a cooling neck collar, and that makes it so I can get around when summer is coming. Many of us, as we get older, don't, for many reasons, it's hard to manage our body temperatures. And for me, that's neurological. And my cooling scarves make it possible for me to get out and enjoy the outdoors despite warmer temperatures. But you see how the hiking poles actually give me 4 points of contact, my 2 feet and the 2 sticks. So it's almost as though I was going along on my hands and knees, much, much more stable. And in fact, more stable than using just one pole. It was hard, it was scary for me to let go of that free hand and actually try using both poles. But in fact, they are much safer and much more stable. And the High Street Trail takes you to this beautiful, beautiful view of the Hidden Charles, which starts over in Hopkinton through Milford, and then comes into Bellingham. And you'd hardly ever know that it goes through Bellingham because it's in this tiny little hidden place at the end of the High Street Trail. It's a lovely, feel secret, but it's actually in some people's backyard pretty much. And it's in fact quite close to the center of town, but you'll never see it from the center of town. There's railroad uh, lines that block it. There's commercial buildings that block it, but it's a special, special place. And so town-owned conservation land, that's another strategy, is if you're looking for a place that's less crowded, a lot of times these town-owned properties, while not as well marked, are also less crowded. I like to encourage people to consider your local cemeteries. A lot of them have beautiful sugar maples, and so you'll see these wonderful, wonderful displays of color in the fall. This one is a small cemetery that I spotted just in Mendon, but they'll typically have either paved or gravel driveways for visitors to come and visit family members. It's important to remember that cemeteries are first a place of remembrance. They are not first a place for social gathering. And so if you decide to visit one of your local cemeteries, keep in mind there may be a memorial service going on. And if so, you do your very, very best to avoid and not interfere with any memorial service that's going on in the cemetery. Be as unobtrusive as possible. The bigger problem is a lot of these places don't really have a place to park. And I think as long as you're not blocking the pathway for other cars to get through there, you're probably going to be fine. Some cemeteries have hours. They expect walkers, but they have rules posted. You can always check in with your town hall and find out, or if it's a church cemetery, check in with the church office, find out if they have any particular rules. They may say that no dogs because of the dog poop issue that many people forget to clean up from their dogs. So, this is where, again, doing a little more homework before you go, but there are so many cemeteries throughout New England, and many of them have gorgeous, gorgeous views of the surrounding countryside. But do a little homework and make sure that respect is key in deciding if these are good places for you to visit for an easy walk. I love to point people to the Blackstone Valley, which is not terribly far from Franklin at all. Here you've got a beautiful view of this stone bridge. This is actually Hartford Avenue, which is one of the Boston Post roads. It's crossing over the Blackstone River. And at the head where I'm standing taking this picture is about a mile length of refurbished, reclaimed towpath from the Blackstone Canal. The towpath is what I called handicapped friendly. Easy parking is either at the Tri-River Health Center, which is right next to where I'm taking this picture, or at Riverbend Farm, which is on Oak Street, which is just another field down Oak Street from the Tri-River Health Center. And there's parking, there's events when there's not a pandemic. There's a bridge that you have to cross to get to the towpath that's on the opposite side of the canal from where the parking is, but there's a bridge with no steps. So It's not completely handicapped accessible, but I would call it handicapped friendly. And you see beautiful, beautiful views along the towpath. Lots of birds. There's open fields. This is very still right here where the canal is. And then there's actually additional places that you can walk that are not handicapped accessible, but I would call them easy walks. And this is all through Riverbend Farm. If you're looking online for information, it is a state park. I like to list some of the good to have things for you to take on a walk, not required, but strongly suggested. I encourage anyone, if you have balance issues or bad knees, consider getting yourself hiking poles. You can try out using them, whether LL Bean has them for you to try. I think Ocean State Job Lot has had them paired up with snowshoes. They've sold hiking poles and snowshoes together in the winter. You're not likely to find snowshoes on the shelves of Ocean State Job Lot right now, but you can get them to try out at REI, LL Bean. There are many, many different versions online. You want to make sure that you get some that have fairly comfortable handles, because if you're using them, your hands may get a little sore if they're on really hard handles. So some with a little bit of responsive cushioning on the handles is nice if possible. They typically telescope. They come in part in 3 pieces. So we just take them apart and put them in our suitcase so that we have them when we're able to fly, visiting grandkids or other places. So it makes sure that we have them at all times so that I can say yes when we find places in the outdoors that we want to visit. You want to take a map. I already mentioned that, a map, the area that you're visiting. Um, Bring some binoculars. You never know what you're going to see on the trail. And there's no end to interesting things along in the outdoors that you can see. Bring your camera. Your cell phone can take wonderful landscape pictures. If you see any kind of birds, you're not likely to get any pictures of them that will even show up with just your cell phone camera. And so even a handheld camera, fancy, you don't need all of the zoom lenses. It helps to have a little bit of a zoom lens for most birds that you're going to see. They're worth bringing. Throw it in that little pack. Don't have it flopping all over the place. I encourage people to bring your rain gear with you, and rain gear can act as a windbreak, a double duty. Whether it's raining or not, it can keep you more comfortable in variable weather. As in spring, we've still got real sudden changes in temperature, or in the morning, it's a lot cooler. And then as it warms up, have a backpack that's big enough that you can stuff your rain gear in there. And then if you do end up with a cloudburst, it's right there. You can pull it out and keep going and not get drenched. But it also can be a windbreak, a really helpful thing to have along. In colder weather, throw an extra sweater, an extra jacket, an extra long sleeve shirt in that backpack, just so that you can layer and make sure that you've got enough clothes to keep yourself safe from getting chilled when you're out on the trail. I encourage people to have some blaze orange clothing for use in hunting season. Hunting season corresponds with the beautiful, beautiful foliage season, and you do not want to miss being out on the trail in foliage season just because we share the woods with hikers, with hunters. Not every property is open to hunting, but many, like trustees of the reservation, allow hunting in season on their properties. They are wonderful places to hike, but you must understand that hunting is also a possibility. Places like Army Corps of Engineers properties, they allow hunting. In Massachusetts, there is no hunting on Sundays. But if you go to Rhode Island, you must wear blaze orange clothing all the time through hunting season, which is both the fall into January and May. Who knew that you must wear blaze orange clothing? And individual must-haves that I like to stress: if you have medications such as EpiPens or asthma inhalers or something else that's of emergency use basis, never leave them in your car when you get ready to go on the trail. Bring them with you, bring them with you. Tell someone else you are walking with where they are, what they are, and make it so that they are accessible. If you stepped on a ground wasp nest, if you climbed a hill and suddenly were finding yourself in need of your asthma inhaler and are not being able to breathe, these are life-saving medications you must have with you on the trail, and you need somebody else to know how to help you get them if it is a crisis. So strategy 1, bring them with you. Strategy 2, know where they are, don't bury them in the bottom of your pack. And strategy 3, always tell someone else that, especially if you're with a group and you've got a group leader, tell that person so that they know, or can somebody else you know is walking with you, where they are and how they can help you in the event of an emergency. Hope there's never an emergency, and that hope is not a strategy. I was just mentioning the West Hill Dam, the Army Corps of Engineers. We have a wonderful Army Corps of Engineers property in Uxbridge, the West Hill Dam. And it has some beautiful, beautiful handicapped friendly trails all along the top of the dam, going down the slope of the dam through some meadows around this wetlands area. The West Hill, the West River flows through here. Beautiful, beautiful spot. And but wear blaze orange, because hunting is allowed there in season except on Sunday. You will find wide trails here that are shared with horses, mountain bikers, and birders. So when you're on the trail, you still have to pay attention. You can't just walk and talk, which is wonderful to do on the trail, but you also really have to pay attention to your surroundings. And if somebody is coming, step out of their way to make sure they can get around you. Mass Audubon has a lovely, lovely place right nearby in Norfolk called Stony Brook. And they have created a handicapped accessible about for 1,000 feet, including trail that has some braille for those who are visually impaired. And I call this a stroller-friendly trail, that there are no steps, even out to the boardwalk, which is a wonderful, wonderful place. No, dogs are never allowed on Mass Audubon properties. It's a wildlife refuge. Dogs are not allowed. I was asked if service dogs are allowed. And while service dogs are eligible to go anywhere with their owners, I would still encourage you, if you have a service dog and wanted to visit Stony Brook, I would just give them a call and just make sure you're clear, or that they're clear before you go. It's just better to do your homework beforehand, because as a principle, dogs are not allowed. Service dogs don't really count as dogs. They're such highly trained animals, and they are support dogs that have a special legal protection of going with you wherever you need to go. When you're out walking, make sure and educate yourself about poison ivy. This is how pretty it looks in the fall. You really want to admire from a distance. You do not want to get up close and personal with poison ivy. I am always amazed at the people I see walking along a trail that has poison ivy all along the edges, and they're trying to avoid us, but they're walking right into the poison ivy. And I say, there's poison ivy there. And they say, oh, really? I didn't recognize it. Make sure and educate yourself. A lot of what is spending time safely outdoors involves some education and not going unprepared. This is what it looks like in the fall. This is what poison ivy looks like climbing up a tree. When you see those kind of funny looking hairy roots, that is poison ivy, and it is just as nasty as the rest of the plant. There are thousands of pictures on the internet of poison ivy for you to start becoming educated as to what it looks like. And it really behooves you, if you wish to spend time in the outdoors other than on your own neighborhood sidewalks, which may or may not have poison ivy next to them, learn what it looks like so that you can avoid it. It is not a nice experience to have to deal with it. If you do, there are over-the-counter products. One is called TechNu, TECH-NU, that helps wash clothes that have been exposed to poison ivy, take a shower with it. And if you've really got a bad rash, Zanfel is another, ZANFEL is a topical cleanser, and it kills the itch on your skin. You'd be very, very glad that you have it as an option if you do sadly encounter it and have to deal with the aftermath. A lot of trails have signs along them. They don't always say things as funny as this trail. And this is thanks to my friend Kate McLeod for sharing this picture from when she was out hiking in Hawaii. And if I saw a sign like this, I would say, yep, I'm not going that way. There's no easy walking there. But many trails will say things that are either trail directional signs, or else they'll say things like public easement over private property, stay on the trail. These signs are there for a purpose. If people using the trail do not pay attention to the sign and start abusing the trail by going off of the trail, it is very possible that your actions as a non-attentive walker will endanger that public access. If it's a public easement, it can get removed, and they can block the trail and say, nope, you can't come here anymore. So when you see signs, take a moment, stop and read them. Do your best to follow the directions as best you can understand, and it will work out better for all of us that way. The Upper Charles Trail in Holliston is a wonderful crushed stone dust trail that is handicapped accessible. It goes the entire length of Holliston from the north end at the Sherburne border all the way to the Milford town line. And there's a story walk along there as well, so you can enjoy that. You see my grandson is there with his little scooter. So bicycles, bikes, walkers, lots and lots of people have been out on these trails, and there's some wonderful, wonderful views along here. In Milford, the trail continues, and once it turns into Milford, Milford made the choice to have their portion of the trail paved and completely handicapped accessible. There are multiple access points throughout Milford, and this is just one of the very multiple views. You've got views of Louisa Lake, you've got views through the downtown, you've got views of the Charles River. It's really a lovely, lovely resource, and goes from the Holliston town line down through downtown Milford and then back north all the way up to the Hopkinton town line on Route 85 in Milford, which is where some of the largest parking is on Route 85. Easy, from Franklin, it's 495 to 85 for the Hopkinton exit, and it takes you to the parking just at the Hopkinton line that is still in Milford. Don't you just love a view? Our area has lots of easy walks. It does not have as many views, so these view places are really quite precious. And this view is looking down south through the Blackstone Valley, and that's a fall picture that I got. And it is an easy walk from Lookout Rock, and it's actually just over the line from Uxbridge into Northbridge. A very, very easy walk from parking on Quaker Street in Northbridge. There is also a walk that you could, a mile walk along the Blackstone from Hartford Avenue, where you can access this. It's on the east bank of the Blackstone River. So it depends on what your stamina is and how much of a walk you want. If you want a real easy walk, you park at the little parking on Quaker Street. If you want about a 2-mile round trip with the gorgeous views, then you would maybe park on Hartford Avenue and walk north. And we have another beautiful, beautiful view. Probably my favorite place to get a view in this area is from Nuckup Hill. It's also called Sweat Hill, and it's accessed from behind the Wrentham Senior Center on Taunton Street. You can park at the Wrentham Senior Center in Taunton Street, and then you walk the road. It's a paved utility road back to their building services department. And then it's a fire road that takes you to the top of Nuckup Hill. It used to be their old town ski hill. And there's actually, the ski equipment is still there for the rope tow that would get people up to the top of there when they had skiing. So lovely, lovely place to walk, an easy walk with amazing views. You can see all the way to Boston on clear days. It's about 30 miles from there, and it's just amazing. Over in Medway, we've got Choate Park, and lots of you may know of Choate Park just as it's a place where they have a lot of community events. But Choate Park has a stroller-friendly trail all the way around the pond there. Choate Park is also where their town swimming happens, but there's a trail that goes all the way around the pond, and then an additional trail that is handicapped friendly, stroller friendly, I would call it, that is stone dust that goes all the way through the woods behind the Medway High School that's on 126 Summer Street, headed up towards Holliston. And eventually, the trails that are planned will connect up to the Upper Charles Trail in Holliston. They've built several boardwalks over Chicken Brook, some other wetlands that are back in there. For now, it can be a little challenging, but some easy walking from Choate Park and through woodland, some nice stone walls and just woodland trails. In the winter, you're going to see a lot more stone walls. Now that the leaves have come out, you'll see less of the historical stone walls that are in that area, but they're all reminders that this area, wherever you see stone walls, those are typically boundary markers and or fields that at one time were completely open and it was cultivated. So they were open fields for agriculture. None of those trees were there. It's a strange way of looking at the landscape, but it changes how you see it when you recognize that all of those trees were not there 150 years ago. Upton State Forest is near the CCC headquarters building in Upton, has broad fire roads, and they were built by the Civilian Conservation Corps men who came out to Upton during the Depression in the 1930s, and they were given work building fire roads and building fire ponds in state forests throughout Massachusetts. And the CCC headquarters building is one of the few existing headquarters buildings that's still standing and has been preserved at Upton. And then there's this fire road that is easy walking. There are many other trails through the Upton State Forest system that are not as easy, but this is a particularly easy trail right from the headquarters building in Upton. So here you've got my whole package. There's my windbreaker rain gear. I've got my hiking poles, hiking socks, my hiking boots, and note that I've got my pants tucked into my hiking socks. This is to keep ticks from binding my skin. We're into spring, which is the highest risk for tick bites right now. As it dries out, there will be less risk. I saw hardly any ticks last summer with the drought that we had, but when it's not as dry, the wet spring, much more likely ticks are very, very active. And the sooner you can find them and get them off of you, the less chance you have of contracting any of the various nasty things that ticks pass along. So I was wearing my face mask. I will still be wearing my face mask. Life has not returned to normal for our family. Some of you, maybe it has. Although vaccinated, we are still being very, very cautious. If you have not been vaccinated, please wear your face mask. It is not always possible to avoid other people on the trail. And if you have not been vaccinated, you really need to be wearing face masks to protect other people and to protect yourself. We really want to get through this and get on the other side of this terrible pandemic. Another wonderful rail trail I want to recommend to you to investigate is the Blackstone Greenway in Blackstone, Massachusetts. It's a 3.5 mile paved, handicapped accessible paved rail trail from Blackstone all the way out to Uxbridge Route 146A. The prettiest part of it is all in Blackstone. There are 8+ bridges in a 1 mile section of this trail. It's truly spectacular, and you want to make sure and visit that when you're able. A photo tip: when you're out walking and you've got your camera and you're saying, what can I take pictures of? Don't forget to look up. We often look around. Yes, we'll look at where our feet are going, but we sometimes forget to just look up and see what is right overhead. A lot of times, if you're in the woods and you look up, there's something really dramatic about having that perspective of looking up into the trees. And here it was just a beautiful blue sky day in the fall. And when I looked up, there was this contrast, the blue and the color. So don't forget to look up. And I want to recommend to you as well, for any of you who have been to the Milford Hospital, you've been within a 1/2 mile of Hopedale Parklands, which has an amazing carriage road almost all the way around their pond. It's about a 2+ mile loop trail that you do have to go out on sidewalks. For part of the way, there are some private houses that make it so you can't go all the way around the pond just on the carriage road. It is a stroller-friendly, wide path, 10 feet wide and more, views of the water almost all the way around. It's just a lovely resource. If you've ever gone to Acadia and appreciate the carriage roads of Acadia, the Hopedale Parklands carriage roads were built before the carriage roads in Acadia were even thought of. This carriage road has been here for over 100 years, a true gift to the community. A number of access points, and I detail where 3 of those parking places are in my Easy Walks in Massachusetts book. Cranberry Bog behind Patriot Place in Foxborough is another stroller-friendly, great place to get out and see a true commercial working bog in action. Many of these commercial bogs do not welcome visitors, and right behind Patriot Place there is a cranberry bog that you can get to see pretty close, which is really fun. So make sure if you are over at Patriot Place, make time to stop at the Cranberry Bog and investigate. It's a loop trail. The very end of it is not as easy. It's got a little bit more of an incline, but it's a very short, about a half-mile loop trail. The Lane Family Homestead is also very close in Foxborough. If you're at Patriot Place and you go north on Route 1 up to North Street and then take a right and go 1 mile to the blinking light, the Lane Family Homestead is a town-owned property. So again, not terribly busy, but it is the headwaters of the Neponset River that goes all the way out to Dorchester Bay. They have a story walk. It's not terribly crowded, and it's an easy walk with beautiful, beautiful water views of the Neponset Reservoir. The Mansfield Rail Trail is paved, handicapped accessible. It's a 1 mile stretch right through downtown Mansfield Center. I understand that there is additional trail being built in Norton, and I have not been able to get over to investigate this situation with that yet. So if you find yourself in Mansfield, there's a place to walk right there, handicapped accessible. There's actually another walking trail off of the rail trail. This is really not something you're going to see bikes on much at all because it's so short. It's just 1 mile in length. But you can either park in the downtown, or you can park there's parking right at the end of the trail next to the the Mansfield Airport. And so I've got 3 local guides, 37 towns, including Franklin, with over 130 trails. And each of these books use the same template. They've got maps to trailheads, parking information, where dogs are welcome, notes on accessibility, what you want to look for, and lots more. We are going to be getting a copy of the Easy Walks in Massachusetts, which includes 16 towns, including Franklin, around the Franklin area. It's basically some of the Upper Charles and the local towns into the Blackstone Valley that are in that the blue book on the left. More Easy Walks includes some more of the Upper Charles Trail and the Neponset and the Assabet River watersheds to the north and to the south. The Easy Walks and Paddles in the 10 Mile River watershed was written in conjunction with the 10 Mile River watershed organization, and they wanted their own book. So that's 6 towns in the Attleboro area. They're all very specific and lots of information. I invite you, if you really want to have a resource that's very local, these are it. So nobody else has written books like that about our area. We're not the Cape, we're not the White Mountains, we're not the Berkshires. We're just south central Massachusetts, but boy, we have some wonderful easy walks right around the corner from where you live. And this is my latest book, which explains how my family and I have found all of these easy walks wherever we have traveled, locally or across New England, across the country, and even into Canada and Western Ireland. Wherever we have gone, and it's been some hard work sometimes, we have been able to find walks that I could enjoy, feel safe on, and be able to take in the amazing landscapes wherever we were. So I recommend this to you, whether it's for other people or for yourself. If you're right in Franklin, you are lucky, because that's right where I've written about first. And if you're living anywhere else or interested in other areas, how do you find all these places? Here's the answer, because every presentation I've ever done, people have asked, how do you find all these places? This is my rather extended answer. And thank you for joining us. And I'm going to stop sharing this now so we can come back and see if there are any